chemical rockets that coughed fire and smoke. They had no faster than light travel. Their nations fought each other over tiny patches of land and water. No grand, unified empire, no mighty fleets, just billions of noisy, short-lived creatures crawling on one wet rock. The news reached Zarath Prime quickly. In the huge, grand conclave hall, where crystal walls glowed under purple skies, the highest lords and admirals gathered around floating holograms of Earth. Laughter echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. Ambassador Vexflar, a senior diplomat with eyes that shone cold blue, stood on the central platform. He pointed one long finger at the blue-green image of Earth spinning slowly. "Look at them," he said in a voice sharp with amusement. "The screaming apes of a single wet rock. They throw stones at each other while we move stars. Their weapons are toys. Their minds are slow. They are not even worth a full fleet." The hall roared with agreement. Admirals slapped their armored chests. Scholars nodded wisely. One lord suggested turning the whole planet into a mining pit for the rare ocean isotopes the Empire needed for shields. Another wanted to use humans as cheap labor and asteroid belts. Vexar raised his hand for silence. "We do not need war for this," he declared. "A small show of force will make them kneel. Send 5 cruisers. That is enough for such primitives. 5 sleek Zarathan cruisers, each the size of a small moon, left the Imperial shipyards. Their engines burned with clean blue fire. Channel. The Zarathan voice was calm and cold. "People of Earth, your world now belongs to the Zarathan Empire. You have no weapons that can harm us. You have 72 hours to surrender all control. Refuse, and we begin cleansing." The message ended with video of one cruiser firing a thin beam that turned an empty asteroid into glowing dust. Panic spread fast. Cities filled with running crowds. News channels showed shaky phone footage of glowing ships in the night sky. Presidents, prime ministers, and generals met in underground bunkers. They argued loudly at first. Some wanted to fight with everything: missiles, jets, nukes. Others begged for peace, but deep scans from the alien cruisers showed the truth. Human weapons would barely scratch the shields. Normal battle was suicide. In the end, a quiet voice cut through the noise. Admiral Elena Vasquez, head of the new United Terran Defense Command, stood up. Her face was tired but hard. "We have one chance," she said. "Not a weapon they expect. Something we hid even from ourselves." Everyone turned to her. She spoke of Project Quantum Anchor years ago in secret labs under thick ice and high mountains. A few scientists had done the impossible. They learned how to link 2 pieces of matter so perfectly that moving one moved the other instantly. No matter the distance, not wormholes, not bending space, just a sudden fold, a blink. The first tests killed people. Reality tore. Ships vanished and never came back. The project was buried under layers of denials and destroyed files. But the knowledge remained in sealed drives. Now, with 3 days left, Vasquez gave the order. "Bring it back online. Every reactor, every satellite, every power plant we have, we link them all." Engineers in cold bunkers wiped sleep from their eyes and started work. Wires snaked across floors. Huge capacitors hummed as they drank power in hidden shipyards under oceans and in empty space at Lorang points. Old freighters and new warships received strange new engines. Crews welded plates over glowing coils. Scientists explained the Math in simple words to frightened sailors. If it works, your ship disappears here and appears there in the same second. No travel time, no warning for them. Many asked the real question, and if it fails, the answer was always quiet. Then we die fast instead of slow. Above the planet, the 5 Zarathian cruisers floated in perfect formation. Their sensors swept Earth again and again. They saw factories running day and night. They saw trucks moving in long lines. They saw lights burning in places that should be dark. Lord Captain Fallier, commander of the squadron, sat on his bridge throne and smiled thinly. "Primitives in panic," he told his officers. "They scurry like insects before the boot comes down." His tactical officer nodded. "Energy spikes everywhere, sir. Probably their power grids failing under the strain." Fallier laughed softly. "Let them strain. In 2 days we will glass their capitals if they do not kneel." He leaned back and watched the countdown clock tick. 72 hours became 60, then 48. On Earth, families said quiet goodbyes. Children hugged parents. Soldiers kissed lovers in dark corners. In the deepest bunker, Admiral Vasquez stood alone for a moment. She looked at a small photo of her daughter, now grown and far away in a shelter. She whispered one word, "Sorry." Then she turned back to the screens. The world waited. The Empire laughed, and somewhere under ice and stone, ancient math began to wake up. As the countdown dropped below 60 hours, the 5 Zarathian cruisers started their show of power to break human will, without wasting too much ammunition. One cruiser, the Silent Judgment, turned its main gravitic lance toward an empty chain of islands in the Pacific. The beam was thin and bright white, like a needle of pure light. It touched the largest atoll, and the whole island vanished in a flash. Where Greenland and Blue Lagoon had been, only steam and bubbling sea remained. The aliens broadcast the image to every screen on Earth with a calm voice saying, "This is mercy. Next time we aim at cities." Solar farms in deserts and wind turbines on mountains into one giant web. Power flowed like rivers toward the hidden sites. Huge room-sized capacitors glowed blue as they charged to dangerous levels. One engineer, a young woman named Liwi, wiped sweat from her brow and said, "If we push any more, the grid might burn out before we even try." Vasquez put a hand on her shoulder. "We burn it all if we have to. Better no power than no planet." Up in space at hidden points behind the moon and in dark Lorraine shadows, human ships waited. There were about 200 of them. Some were old cargo haulers with extra armor plates welded on. Others were fast attack boats built in secret shipyards under the sea. A few were true warships with long railguns and missile bays. All of them now carried the new anchor drives. Strange devices that looked like twisted metal rings covered in glowing lines. Technicians crawled over hulls in zero gravity, sealing last connections. Inside the ships, crews trained in, rushed drills. They learned how to fire weapons the second they arrived. They practiced emergency maneuvers for when things went wrong. Many knew the odds were bad. Early anchor tests had turned test ships into clouds of hot gas or left them stuck halfway between places, crews frozen in screaming poses. Captain Marcus Hale of the heavy cruiser Iron Rain gathered his people in the Messole. He was a tall man with gray in his beard. "Listen," he said in a steady voice. "We might blink out and never come back, or we might come back in pieces. But if we do nothing, those cruisers will turn our homes to ash. So we try. We try hard." His crew nodded. Some smiled weakly. Others wrote letters on data pads and sent them to family with delay timers. On Earth, cities went quiet in strange ways. Street lights dimmed on orders to save every watt. Factories that made cars now made capacitor banks. Truck drivers hauled strange equipment through back roads at night. Police kept order while volunteers helped load supplies. In one small town in the mountains, an old man who once worked on the first Anchor prototype sat on his porch and watched the sky. He knew the risks better than most. He whispered to the stars, "Don't tear them apart like you tore my friends." Time kept falling. 40 hours left. 36. The Zarathian commander, Lord Captain Thaler, grew bored. He ordered another demonstration. This time, a small beam scorched a desert far from any city. Sand turned to glass in a perfect circle. "They see we can choose where to strike," he told his bridge crew. "Fear will do the rest." His sensors picked up wild energy readings from Earth, spikes that rose and fell like heartbeats. "Their primitive machines are breaking under stress," he said. "Good, it speeds surrender." But in truth, the spikes came from the resonance grid, reaching full charge. Deep under the Himalayas, the final link snapped into place. A low hum filled the mountain. Lights flickered across continents as power surged. In bunkers, screens showed, green status bars climbing. Admiral Vasquez stood in the main control room. Maps of the solar system floated around her. Red dots marked the enemy cruisers. Green dots showed human ships ready to jump. She spoke to all captains over secure channels. "We have one window. The anchor field is stable for maybe 20 minutes. After that, it collapses. We go in close inside their formation. Point blank. No fancy flying. Just hit hard and fast. If you arrive whole, fight. If you don't, thank you for trying." Voices answered back from every ship. Some said, "Aye." One young pilot just said, "See you on the other side, Admiral." Vasquez closed her eyes for a second. She saw her daughter's face again. Then she opened them. "All ships, stand by for anchor sink. T-minus 10 minutes. On the bridges of the Zarathian cruisers, officers played strategy games on side screens. They joked about how many human leaders would beg on their knees. Fallier sipped a warm drink and watched Earth turn below him. He saw no threat, only a scared, primitive world about to kneel. He had no idea that 200 human ships were charging impossible engines. He had no idea that the apes he mocked were about to fold space itself. 30 hours became 24, then 18. The hum under the mountains grew louder. Lights dimmed across half the planet to feed the grid. In dark rooms, people held hands and waited. In space, crews trapped in tight, helmets locked, weapons hot, hearts pounded. Admiral Vasquez gave the final order. "Sync complete. All ships, jump on my mark." The clock hit 0 for the first phase. Somewhere in the cold void, reality prepared to bend. The Empire still laughed, but the laughter would soon turn to screams. With less than 18 hours left on the alien ultimatum, a strange quiet fell over Earth and the space around it. The 5 Zarathian cruisers hung high above the planet like silver knives ready to fall. Their bright hulls caught sunlight and threw long shadows across continents. On their bridges, Lord Captain Thaler leaned forward in his high seat and studied the latest scans. He saw factories still running, lights flickering in strange patterns, trucks moving fast on empty roads at night. But no missiles rose, no fighters scrambled, no desperate radio pleas for mercy came. Only silence. Thaler smiled a thin, satisfied smile. "They have accepted their place," he told his first officer. "The fear has done its work. They wait like lambs for the knife." His officers laughed quietly and returned to their games and drinks. One junior sensor tech noticed odd energy bursts, short, sharp spikes that appeared all over the planet and then vanished. Thaler waved a hand. "Overloaded grids, primitive reactors failing. It means nothing." He ordered the squadron to hold position and prepare the final broadcast. In exactly 12 hours, he would demand the surrender of all governments on live feed to the entire empire. Citizens back home would watch and cheer as another weak world joined the fold. On Earth, the quiet felt heavier. Streets emptied earlier than usual, shops closed, families gathered in homes with curtains drawn tight. Television screens showed the same looping message from the aliens, but many people turned them off. Instead, they talked in low voices, held children close, looked at old photos. In big cities, volunteers handed out water and blankets and underground shelters. In small villages, people sat on porches and watched the sky where the enemy ships glowed like evil stars. No one knew exactly what would happen next, but everyone felt the weight of it. In hidden shipyards deep under the Pacific Ocean, welders finished the last welds on anchor drive rings. Sparks flew in dark water. Divers checked seals one final time on orbital platforms drifting in Laranji points. Crews powered down non-essential systems to hide their presence. Ships went cold, engines silent, lights dim, heat signatures dropped to almost nothing. From the outside, they looked like dead hulks or space junk. Inside, men and women sat strapped in seats, helmets on, gloves tight. They checked weapons again and again, railguns loaded with dents, slugs, missile tubes filled with nuclear-tipped warheads, laser batteries charged to full. Medics walked aisles handing out stim packs and pain shots. Some crew wrote final messages on personal pads. A young gunner on the frigate Shadow Fang typed to his sister, "If I don't come back, tell Mom I tried to make it right." Captains walked their bridges, speaking to every person by name. They shared stories, cracked small jokes, reminded everyone why they were here. "They think we're nothing," one captain said over the intercom. "Let's show them we're everything." In the main Antarctic bunker, Admiral Elena Vasquez stood before a wall of screens. Green lines connected dots across the solar system. Human ships ready, anchor nodes charged, resonance fields stable. Scientists monitored the math in real time. One older man, Dr. Harlan, who had seen the first deadly tests years ago, looked at Vasquez with tired eyes. "The field will hold for 20 minutes at most," he said. "After that, it collapses. Anyone still in transit gets shredded." Vasquez nodded. "Then we make those 20 minutes count." She opened the fleet-wide channel. Her voice was calm but firm. "All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez. The Empire mocks us because they do not understand us. They see our rockets and our fights and think we are weak. But we have spent years building something they cannot imagine. In a few hours, we will prove them wrong. You are not just fighting for Earth. You are fighting for every person who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of more. If we succeed, the galaxy will never laugh at us again. If we fail, know that you are the bravest people I have ever known." Silence followed her words. Then, one by one, captains replied. "Iron Rain standing by. Shadowfang ready. Titan's Wrath awaits your mark." 200 voices answered in turn. Vasquez felt a lump in her throat but pushed it down. She turned to her tactical officer. "Show me the target overlay." A hologram appeared. 5 red cruiser icons floating in neat formation near Earth. Small gaps showed between them, spaces just wide enough for human ships. "If the math was perfect, we aim for the heart of their line," she said. "Materialize inside their shields, inside their hulls if we have to. No second chances." In the Empire's news feeds, live coverage played across thousands of worlds. Zarathian citizens sat in comfortable homes and watched the blue planet turn. Commentators spoke in smooth voices. "The primitives have not responded. Their time runs out. Soon the cleansing will begin." Bets were placed in gambling halls. How many minutes until surrender? How many cities would burn first? On Zarath Prime, Ambassador Vexlar hosted a small party in his tower. Guests raised glasses of sparkling liquid and toasted the easy victory. To the end of the screaming apes, Vexlar said with a laugh, everyone drank. No one noticed the small warning light on a distant sensor array, a faint, impossible energy reading from Sol. Too small to worry about, too strange to understand. Back on Earth, the final hours ticked down. 12 became 10. 10 became 8. In bunkers and ships, people took deep breaths. Helmets sealed with soft clicks, hands gripped controls, eyes fixed on countdown clocks. Admiral Vasquez stood alone for a moment in a quiet corridor. She pulled out the small photo of her daughter again. She touched the smiling face with one finger. "Hold on, kid," she whispered. "Mom's coming home." Then she walked back to the command room. The resonance grid hummed louder now, a deep vibration felt in bones. Lights across. The planet dimmed further as every last drop of power fed the anchor. In space, the cold human fleet waited like ghosts. Engines dark, weapons hot, crews silent. Lord Captain Fallier checked the time. 8 hours left. He ordered the broadcast prepared. "Let them see their doom coming," he said. He had no idea that doom was already charging in secret. No idea that the apes he scorned had turned impossible science into a blade. The galaxy watched. Earth held its breath, and somewhere in the math of folded. Space, the moment of truth, drew near. The final seconds ticked away in perfect silence across every human ship and bunker. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the Antarctic Command Center with her eyes fixed on the master clock. Red numbers reached 0. She spoke one word into the fleet channel. "Mark." In that instant, the resonance grid fired with a sound like the universe tearing open. A wave of invisible force rolled across the planet and out into space. Power plants screamed and died as every last joule poured into the anchor field. Lights across half the world went black. Cities plunged into sudden dark. People in shelters held their breath. Then 200 human warships vanished. No flash, no thunder, no trail of fire. They simply were not there anymore. One heartbeat later, they were somewhere else. The Iron Rain appeared first, materializing inside the belly of the Zaratha dreadnought, Eternal Dominion. Its bow punched through armor like a knife through paper. Metal screamed as hulls fused together in impossible ways. Crews on the human ship felt the jolt, but stayed strapped in. Captain Marcus Hale shouted, "All batteries fire!" Railguns roared at 0 range. Slugs punched straight through bulkheads into magazines. Secondary explosions bloomed inside the Imperial ship like flowers of orange fire. The silent judgment found 2 Terran frigates blinking into existence right beside its bridge. One frigate's nose overlapped the command deck by meters. Alien officers had no time to scream before human marines in Nassau's powered armor cut through the fused hull and stormed in with rifles blazing. Lasers painted corridors red. Zarathian security teams tried to respond, but found enemies already among them, shooting from angles that made no sense. On the Shadowfang, a missile cruiser appeared inside the engine section of another cruiser. Its warheads detonated on contact. A chain reaction ripped the Imperial ship in half. Debris spun outward in slow motion. Across the formation, the same impossible scene repeated. Human ships blinked into gaps, too small for normal approach. Some arrived whole, some arrived missing pieces, tails sheared off, sections crushed into twisted metal, but enough arrived intact to turn the battle into slaughter. Point defense turrets on Zarathian ships spun uselessly. Their targeting computers could not lock onto targets that had not moved through space. Shields shimmered but did nothing against enemies already inside the field. Lord Captain Thalier felt his flagship shudder. Alarms wailed. Lights flickered. He stared at his tactical display in disbelief as 3 green icons, human ships, suddenly appeared, overlapping his own position. "Impossible!" he shouted. "They were not there a second ago." His first officer tried to answer, but a railgun slug from the iron rain tore through the bridge bulkhead. Shrapnel filled the air. Thalir's armored chest exploded in red mist. He fell without another word. On other bridges, similar scenes played out. Alien captains died, staring at screens that showed enemies where no enemies should be. Human boarding teams poured onto command decks, shooting down anyone who moved. Some aliens fought back with energy blades and plasma pistols. Fights became brutal and close, blood mixed with sparks in zero gravity. But humans had surprise and rage on their side. They pushed forward room by room. In the engine bays, human techs who arrived alive planted charges on alien reactors. Blasts followed. Ships tore themselves apart from within. Outside, the neat Imperial formation collapsed into chaos. Cruisers tried to turn and fire, but hit their own allies instead. Friendly fire lit the void. One dreadnought fired its gravitic lance wildly and sliced another in half. Debris clouds grew thick. Twisted metal, frozen bodies, glowing plasma vented into space. Human losses mounted fast. Some ships never made the jump right. The frigate Dawnreaker emerged as a cloud of glowing particles. Its crew died in the fold. Others arrived too close to solid matter and fused into enemy hulls, crushed instantly. A heavy carrier materialized halfway, inside a cruiser. Both ships imploded in a bright flash, but for every ship lost, 3 more struck true. Railguns hammered at knife-fight range. Missiles launched from tubes pressed against alien armor. Nuclear devices went off in engine cores. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Not hours, not days. 17 minutes from first jump to last explosion. When it ended, the 5 Zarathian cruisers were gone. Only expanding clouds of hot gas, shattered armor plates, and drifting wreckage marked where they had been. Human ships that survived limped away on conventional drives. Many trailed fire in air. Holes glowed from heat. Crews cheered weakly through blood and smoke. Medics rushed to wounded. Engineers fought fires. Captain Hale on the battered iron rain looked at his cracked view cream. Pieces of the Eternal Dominion floated past like broken toys. He keyed the fleet channel with a shaking hand. All surviving ships report status. Voices answered one by one. Tired, hurt, but alive. Shadowfang here. Heavy damage, but holding. Titan's Wrath reporting. We lost half our guns, but we're still breathing. Admiral Vasquez listened from her bunker as reports came in. Over 60% of the fleet never returned whole. Thousands dead in seconds, but the enemy was annihilated. She closed her eyes and let out a long breath. Then she opened a new channel, one that broadcast to every remaining satellite and every surviving ship. "Earth," she said in a voice that carried across the planet. "This is Admiral Vasquez. The Zarathian squadron is destroyed. We did it. We hit them where they never expected. Our people fought. Our people won." Cheers erupted in shelters. Tears ran down faces. In space, surviving crews pounded consoles and shouted until their throats hurt. The impossible had happened. The apes had struck back, and the Empire would soon learn what real fear felt like. In the quiet aftermath, pieces of the 5 Zarathian cruisers drifted slowly through the space near Earth, like broken glass floating in a pond. Twisted metal plates spun end over end. Frozen bodies and alien armor tumbled silently. Small fires burned out in vacuum pockets before dying. The human survivors counted their losses with heavy hearts. 123 ships had jumped. Only 71 limped back on slow conventional drives, trailing sparks and leaking air. The rest were gone, vaporized in the fold, crushed on arrival or torn apart in the first frantic seconds of battle. Thousands of men and women who had kissed families goodbye never came home. But the enemy was erased completely. Admiral Elena Vasquez received the final damage reports in her Antarctic bunker as emergency lights flickered back on across the planet. Power grids groaned as they tried to restart. She looked at the numbers. Over 60% lost, and felt the weight settle in her chest. Yet when she stepped to the main console and opened the wide broadcast channel, her voice stayed steady. This is Admiral Vasquez to all of Earth and to any listening ships of the Zarathian Empire. The Aibo, threat above our world is ended. 5 enemy cruisers came to conquer us. None left. We struck from nowhere. We struck hard. We struck first. Earth stands. The words went out on every frequency, every satellite, every surviving relay. In shelters, people cheered until their voices cracked. Strangers hugged. Children jumped up and down. In hospitals, wounded soldiers raised weak fists when nurses told them the news. On the batter bridge of the Iron Rain, Captain Marcus Hales sat in his command chair with blood drying on his forehead. His ship had lost engines 2 and 3, half its guns and a third of the crew. But he watched the drifting wreckage of the Eternal Dominion on the cracked view screen and allowed himself a small, tired smile. "We did it," he whispered to no one. Then he keyed the fleet channel. "All ships, form up on me. We're going home." The survivors gathered in a ragged line and began the long, slow burn toward Earth orbit. Repair crews worked without rest, sealing hull breaches with emergency foam, rerouting power, tending the wounded. Med bays overflowed. Doctors and nurses moved like shadows, saving who they could. Back on Zareth Prime, the news arrived like a thunderclap. The Grand Conclave chamber, usually full of proud voices and bright holograms, went deathly still. A junior aide burst in during a routine meeting and whispered to the High Chancellor. The Chancellor's metallic face froze. He waved for silence. Then the live feed from Saul played on the central display. Everyone watched in horror. Human ships appearing from thin air, Imperial cruisers ripping open from inside, explosions blooming like deadly flowers, Lord Captain Thaler's final moments caught on a dying camera, his body torn apart mid-shoutout. Ambassador Vexlar, he had once called humans screaming apes, sat in the front row. His cold blue eyes widened. His long fingers gripped the armrests until metal bent. When the feed ended, no one spoke for a long minute. Then panic erupted. Voices shouted over each other. How? Impossible. They have no FTL. Admirals demanded full fleet mobilization. Scholars scrambled for data on quantum entanglement. Citizens in the streets below the tower watched the same footage on public screens and felt the first real fear in generations. The empire that had never lost now stared at defeat. Ambassador Vexar left the chamber without a word. Hours later, guards found him in his private quarters. He had taken his own ceremonial blade across the throat. His body lay under a window that looked out on the purple sky. A short note rested beside him. "We laughed. Now they laugh." Word spread fast. The Grand Conclave declared an empire-wide emergency. All fleets recalled to defensive lines. Border worlds went on high alert. Trade ships turned back. No one knew what humans would do next. On Earth, the first repair ships reached orbit. Shuttles fed wounded down to hospitals. Families waited at landing fields with tears and open arms. News channels showed crowds cheering battered ships as they passed overhead. In hidden labs, scientists studied the anchor drives that had survived. Improvements already whispered. Longer range, safer jumps, bigger ships. Admiral Vasquez walked out of the bunker into cold Antarctic air for the first time in days. Snow crunched under her boots. She looked up at the stars. A junior officer approached quietly. "Ma'am, is the war over?" Vasquez kept her eyes on the sky. She thought of the lost crews, the families waiting for names that would never come home. The Empire now watching them with new eyes. "No," she said softly. "It's just beginning." "But next time they won't laugh." She turned and walked back inside. The world kept turning. Earth repaired, ships healed, people mourned and remembered. And somewhere in deep space, messages began to reach other worlds. Simple words carried on tight beam relays. We were never helpless. We were waiting. The galaxy listened. The mockery was dead. In its place rose something new. Fear, respect, and the knowledge that the screaming apes of one small wet rock had teeth. After all, the stars would never look the same again.